In the next set of videos, we're going to look at how we can create alphas using images that we can find on the internet. I'm going to show you how to cut it out and create your own alpha. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to use the crisscross method to build your grass texture inside of Maya. So let's get started. So what I did first was I actually went to CG Textures to find a texture, and I found this one here, which is quite useful for long grass. But before we actually are able to put it inside Maya and start to play around with it and create this kind of like crisscross method, we have to clean it up. And the way we do that is actually in Photoshop. So what I'm going to do is, that's my prepared earlier one. So this is the image once it's downloaded. If I just undo that, so you can see that it's got some bits that we're going to need to clean up. So in Photoshop, the best way to do this. So firstly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go File, New. I'm going to create a new texture. So this is probably what you want for this sort of thing. Now, if you want a more high resolution, say that you've got more like bits in between showing the background and that sort of stuff, you're going to probably want to have it at 1024 by 512. Actually, we'll go with that anyway. So create. And what we need to do is we need to actually select part of this. And what I'm going to just quickly do is let's just pixels. I'll do something on that in a minute. But anyway, so I'm going to cut out. So we don't need this bottom bit. Or we don't need. That. So we could use something called a color range. We can actually start to select. Get a rough cutout. Now, one thing we do want to do is want to select this. Oh, yeah, making sure you haven't got your image selected as grayscale. When I'm doing a lot of texture work, I have to do take the lighting information out of textures. Especially images that I've either gone out and taken myself or things, so that's why it seems to be always on thingy. Okay, so actually we've got too much space here, so let's actually dumb this image down. So you go image size and then change it back to 512. There you go. That's probably what we want. Bad Matt for not turning your mobile phone off while recording. Anyway. And then what I probably want to do is I want to start to clean this out even more. So if I go select color range and start to select these hues, and I'm holding shift left click to select different hues of brown here to get rid of it. Click OK. And then I can just click delete. And again, I'm going to have to go in, select color range. Now, I've got problems here because it's deleted bits of this, which is not what we want. So what I'm going to do is just lower this a little bit more, and then I'm going to start to clean this up with the clone stamp tool. I'm going to start to select areas that I can actually do that. Start to clean up this. You can see you can start to really clean up this area and get rid of these browns and start to actually make Sorry, my phone's going mental at the moment. I don't know why. Start to build that in a little bit. Start to look at this as well. Now I'm not happy with this. This is going to take too much of a cleanup. So what we can do instead is I could actually duplicate this and kind of make it so it kind of fits in. So we get a nice thingy. Now one of the things I would do as well is merge the layer and then go to crop. Just crop it. Clone stamp here as well. Now one of the things you want to avoid doing with alphas is having a pure white background. Now the reason for this is because you get, ooh, hello. You get white outlining around your alpha. So if your alpha isn't pretty accurate, you're gonna start to get thingy. And what I'm doing now is I'm just taking a razor brush to areas that I think I can't really clone stamp out. So I mean this area here I can, so I can do this. Start to do that, and like this bigger area here I can clone stamp. And I'm holding Alt when I'm doing this to select the area if you've never used the clone stamp before. I'm trying to match it as best as possible so I'm not getting any repeated. And like stuff down here as well you want to thingy. And if push comes to shove you could actually use the paintbrush as well. Probably not at that size though. And start to paint things as well. Now depending on the project you might need to paint these, so if you're doing like kind of a World of Warcraft style you probably want to paint your own, so you probably want to make some different variations of these painted and then start to lay them together. I'm just showing you this method because it kind of shows you how to do that, but just using images instead. And one of the things that I always point out is that you just can't slap an image onto. If you download a texture from the internet, you're gonna have to, or you've gone out and taken it yourself, you're gonna have to actually make your own. You're gonna have to edit it. There's no way two ways about it. If you just slap it onto a model, it's just gonna look shit. Okay, I think some bits up here. Again, I'm just pressing E to get to the eraser tool. Okay, so I'm happy with that for the time being. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the background colour of this to a certain colour. So if we grab the brush, we can grab the paint tool, paint bucket tool. So right click, bucket tool. I'm going to find a green that's pretty much, yeah, probably that one there. Which in colour value it's 122, 162, 56 on the RGB. I'll leave that up for a minute so you can see that. Okay. And then with this, I'm going to press Alt Backspace. Hello. And there we go. We've started filling this out. So I can see there's an error here, so we can go get rid of that. Now it's still a bit light, so I mean we can play around with the saturation, so brightness and contrast. Till we get the roughly what we want, probably about there. And we can play around with the levels as well, hue and saturation. All I'm doing is pressing Alt to attach it to just this layer. And one last thing, levels, which I always find is useful. Okay, so once you're happy with that, this is ready for an alpha. Oh, hang on, get rid of that tip there. Okay, now one thing you could do is you could actually completely grayscale this out, which would mean doing that, and then you can start to play with the levels a little bit more. So let's see a bit more. And if you really wanted to as well, what you could do is actually find the colour that you want and then add this as a multiplier. An overlay. But we don't really want to do. Have a play around, see what you want to do with it. Luckily, because we haven't damaged this layer, because we've used the masks, we can actually just go like this and bring the saturation back up. And we can actually go back to this and start to bring this back down to. There you go. So once that's done, we need to create the alpha. So the best way to do this is select the cutout and just to have a look, see if there's anything amiss. We've got a few bits up here that I could probably clean up. Overall, it's not too bad. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to select that, Control Shift N, create a new layer. Always forget that hotkey. And then I'm going to paint this white, because that's what our white means it's solid, black means it's completely cut out, greys mean it's kind of transparent. And we can go in, we can actually not do that. Grab the brush and just paint. Clean things up. We might want some of this at the top, but definitely at the bottom there shouldn't be any bits that are see-through. We want to do that as well. Probably don't want to cut like that. Okay. Ooh, here we go. You don't want that. Okay, so that's me done. So we've got our alpha. We're just going to create a new layer and we're going to paint this black. Okay. Now again, probably what you want to do is go back into your alpha layer here and grab the eraser tool. Just paint out any discrepancies that you don't think is going to work. Okay, so we got that now. Oh, hang on. Back to my paintbrush. Okay, so I'm just going to Control G to group this. I'm going to call this alpha. And then I'm going to grab this. If you ever press Control F, that means find, and then Control F will get rid of it. Control G groups, and I'm going to call this albedo. I'm just going to turn that off a minute. I'm going to save this. So I've already saved mine as PST earlier on. So I'm going to use this one here, alpha. And then I'm going to turn the alpha off. I'm going to save this as albedo. And that's it for Photoshop. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to jump into Maya and show you how to create the planes to put this on. There's also another method of saving out the alpha. Sometimes the programs will require you to save it out in the alpha channel of a target. The way we do that is we use the 32-bit target to save that. So I've just opened up my albedo and I'm just going to go over to my channels box here and click new alpha. Then I'm going to grab my alpha that I saved out separately, and this is why it's really good to do this. It's Control C, selecting all of it, and then Control V. And that means now I have an alpha saved in my original target, and then I'm going to save this to File, Save As, make sure it's set to target, I'm just going to call this alpha, just so I don't overwrite this. Click save, and select 32-bit here, click OK. That means now when this is loaded into a certain piece of software, maybe Maya or Unreal, Unreal doesn't really like this method. Unity does though, so it depends on what game engine you're using. But yeah, so we can move on to actually adding this into the Maya now. The UVs. Now the problem at the moment is the UVs are at scale a little bit, so what we're going to do is I'm just going to actually do a, if you've never seen this UV editor before, this is called Nightshade, which I've shown in other videos, which is brilliant. Okay, let's okay, now before we do anything else with the UVs, I'm just going to go right click, assign existing material, and I'm just going to assign new material. Okay, and then I'm going to click Lambert, because I don't need a specular. And all I'm going to do is just delete the history, so edit, delete by type, history, so I can see my Lambert. I'm going to call this grass matte. I'm going to load in the albedo in colour, so select the checker box. It's upside down. Anyway, let's grab the UVs. Let's have a quick look at that. Okay. All I'm doing there is I'm just scaling up the UV. It pretty much tiles, which is good. Just making sure I don't. Now, don't worry about this green, because we're going to cut that out now with the transparency. So I'm going to load in the alpha that I made. Okay, we've got pretty much, we've just got a bit of an issue at the top. So I'm going to just drag that down so it's definitely inside the boundary. There you go, that's pretty much how you create an alpha. So what we're going to do now is, all this wasted space here we don't want. So what I'm going to do is, with the insert edge loop tool, so I'm holding shift right click and grabbing that option, I'm just going to go relative. I'm going to start to put in, actually, no, not 6, 3. Okay, and then I'm going to put my own in as well. Generally this is just to get, and what we can do is, as long as you've got in the move tool under tool settings, as long as you've got preserve UV on, you can actually start to do this. Start to shape it, because you've got all this wasted space. And also as well, that's going to take rendering power, so actually molding this to the shape that you want it is a good thing. Okay, let's start that one again. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to start to just crisscross this to make it a little bit better. So the only thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make this go down a little bit, and this one as well, so it's kind of, yeah. So you grab it, and I'm going to space it. Now, if you want it really fine, you can go half a space in between. But for this demonstration, I'm just going to put it to here. I'm pressing Ctrl D to duplicate. and holding X to snap it. And then what we're going to do as well, I'm going to duplicate that, hold J to snap rotate it, and then I'm going to put this, because then we know exactly how many of these we're going to need. Now, I think that should be enough, maybe one more. Okay, so the problem we got at the moment with this as well, it's too uniformed, and also you guys will have this setting turned off, so you'll be able to see through it, which is not what we want. So to change that, if you go to rendering viewport 2.0 and change this to depth peeling, that seems to work for me. Click close. And we're also going to combine this, so shift right click combine. Just delete the history, freeze the transformations and send to the pivot. Now I want to make this a bit more less uniformed. So the best way to do that is actually, if we go over to this tab here and go rigging and go deform and create a lattice. Always say that wrong, I do apologise. Let's put this back to 5. Okay, you don't want to have too many of these control points. And we're going to right click lattice points, and then I'm just going to start to grab points. Don't worry about selecting the bottom one, because we can go in and change that in a minute. That's probably a bit too extreme. That one there. Okay, and once you're happy with that, we can just select and delete the history, making sure you select the actual grass. Delete the history, and that will get rid of our lettuce. And then what we want to do is we want to have the grass flat, because grass doesn't kind of rise like that unless it's on a hill. So the best way to do that is press spacebar and go into the side view, and what we're going to do is we're going to grab these bottom UVs and straighten up. So it's now all evenly spaced. Now the problem we've got at the moment as well is we've got backface culling on. So to render this two-sided, we have to select the object and go into Attribute Editor and get rid of double-sided. The problem with that is obviously when you go to the back. So if we go double-sided, shading. Why is this not one? Center. It's working earlier. Let's get rid of that. Now in Engine, what we can do is we can actually create a shader that has two-sided shading on it, so then we can get rid of that whole issue there. And it's the same with inside of 3DO as well. There you go. That's how you can start to create grass. And if we start to actually duplicate this, rotate it a little bit. Now in Unreal as well, there's an actual paint tool that you can start to paint this. So okay, so that's the end of this tutorial. Hopefully it's been helpful, and you can start to create alphas. You can do this with tree branches, other grass. You can also paint your own grass as well, just to help sell this scene. So yeah, see you in the next video.